everyone. I'm Wendell Jones, and welcome to this edition of the program, Jones and Company. On this program, we examine national issues. Over the last several weeks, we've heard a whole lot about immigration matters in our country. And members of the Grand Bahama Human Rights Association, they have sent out a number of press releases speaking to the issue of registration of non-Bahamian children in our schools. And you would have seen and heard of releases made by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Honorable Fred Mitchell, as well. Well, today on our program, we are pleased to have the Minister to respond to some of the questions that you, members of the public, might want answered on this particular issue and on immigration matters generally. And it's our pleasure to welcome him back again. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
You've had an interesting, the last fortnight or so. We've seen quite a number of press releases coming from your ministry. It has created confusion in the country, the decision of the government to enforce the Immigration Act. Isn't that right?
No, I wouldn't describe it as confusion. I think the confusion is, if there is any, has to do with the interpretation of remarks that I gave about the requirement for everybody in the country to have something which evidences they have a right to be in the Bahamas. And that applies to men, women, and children. Mm-hmm. And that's the rule. What I spoke to was the question of children in school, and I said we would be asking, come the fall, the schools to be sure that those people who were getting into the schools also had a permit to reside in the Bahamas. Mm-hmm. That, of course, is a separate issue from whether people have the right to enter school or allowed in school. What we know is the generality of the immigration law is that everybody who's here, who's not Bahamian, must have a permit to reside or a permit to work.
But this particular rule has not been enforced.
Again, my answer is more nuanced than that, because thousands of people already hold permits to reside for their children. Mm. You know, I mean, from the Swiss banker to the teacher. I was at one of the other media corporations here, young man who works behind the console of the radio station said his parents were Guyanese, they're teachers here. He's had one all the time he's been here, $25. The price hasn't changed, it's always been the same. So that's the case.
Well, why all of the talk now if the Immigration Department has been enforcing this particular law?
Well, you know, we're in a period of heightened sensitivity to immigration generally because of the announcements that we're going to be requiring people in these immigration checks to be able to produce some evidence that they have a right to be here. Mm. And of course, once you mention children, that's very emotive. The people who are practiced in the art of victimhood for migrants have sought to make this a cause célèbre, which it isn't, because there's no fire here, there's no smoke, there's no smoking gun, there's no huge issue here. It is a mountain being made out of a molehill. Mm-hmm. Because the law is what it is, and it's going to be enforced. And the Ministry of Education and the schools have a right to say who gets into their school. That's entirely up to them. What we do know, again, is the generality of the law is that everyone should have a permit to reside. Men, women, children.
But children are entitled to an education if they are here.
That's right. Yeah.
Legally or illegally.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And
under our law, the
yes.
Education Act says everyone under 16, without distinction as it relates to nationality, place of origin. Yeah.
So fine. So if that is the case, then no child would be denied entry into a school.
The Ministry of Education again speaks to that, and I saw a statement made by the Director of Education said no one will be excluded from an education. But that's a different issue from whether or not you need to have a permit to reside. Mm. And what we've said, for example, is administratively, because the problem really is the children of illegal migrants. That's the issue. Now, I don't have a sense of what the figures are like on this, but my guess is that most people who have children in the schools here, their parents have work permits. And it's just a question of them going and getting it. Now, where you do find that you have illegal migrants, that's something the Ministry of Education will have to deal with administratively, because you have to fulfill your obligations, of course, according to law, the laws of the Bahamas. And what we've said is, if you find such a case, since the Director of Immigration can grant a permit for a specific term, that term can run with the same period that the parent is in the country. So when the parent goes, the child goes.
But if a child is born in the Bahamas, Minister, I am assuming that that child gets a birth certificate.
Yes, that child does.
And
well, no, not automatically. Under the law, it's the parent's responsibility to register the child, and it should be done within 21 days of the child's birth. And I think you have up to 2 years to register the child. After 2 years, of course, it's not possible to register for a child for a birth certificate.
Good. So assuming that the vast majority of these children of non-Bahamians would have birth certificates, shouldn't the birth certificate suffice for their entry into a school?
No, because, well, again, let me answer it correctly. The schools have the responsibility in the say who enters the school, and they know what the requirements are. Now, the Minister of Education said in his statement that this was also a convenient opportunity to do another thing with Bahamian parents, is that too many people are not registering the births of their children even. So you have no documentation as to not only who is Bahamian and who's not Bahamian, but actually of your existence and birth. The number of occasions now where people have to rely on affidavits of birth because their birth wasn't properly registered at birth in the hospital. So that's an issue. And the second thing, of course, is that our birth certificate doesn't have a biometric in it. So there's nothing which really ties you to that birth certificate. And immigration, in the case of non-Bahamians who've been seeking to take advantage of the constitutional provision which says that on your 18th birthday and before your 19th birthday you can apply to be registered as a citizen of the Bahamas, has been using several devices in order to prove that that's you. One of which is they're requiring you to go to the Princess Margaret Hospital and show that a baby born to such and such a person was actually born, and you try to tie that to the birth certificate. You know, it becomes much more complicated when you have stories like this. I was born here, I was taken by my parents to Haiti, and now I'm back 10 years later, and this is my birth certificate. Well, what ties you to the birth certificate? So they've been asking for baptismal certificates as well, immunization records as well, school records where they exist, to try and tie you, to track you back to that birth certificate. So what we think is that all around this will be better. The insistence on a permit, because from the time the baby is born, once the baby has a permit to reside, that gives you a record, a physical record, and a photograph of that baby and child, and ties that child and baby to the parents. And so in the long run, it's better for all around.
Your detractors would say that you're making it burdensome or making it onerous on poor people, people who are struggling, that they would have to pay $125, $100 for the processing, and $25 for the certificate.
Look, if you want to be a student in the United States, you got to pay $360 now, right now, to get a student visa to go to the U.S. And in Barbados, I'm advised that if you're a non-national, you can't go into the Barbados public school system at all. And there are many people who are arguing that that should be the case here. So anybody who wants to bring in a worker from the outside ought to pay the full economic cost of bringing in that worker from the outside, including education, including housing, and including health care. And that's why we said, come the 1st of April, we're looking at tying a provision, a condition to a work permit, that you got to have health insurance and have adequate housing before we grant you the work permit. All of this because the Bahamian public has been complaining that the social services system, the healthcare system, and the education system has been under such a severe strain from people who are not making a contribution to the public purse, so to speak.
It has been under a severe strain because of inaction on the part of the government, negligence really on the part of successive governments to protect our borders and to police the system. Isn't that right?
Well, I don't want to denounce all of my predecessors. I think everybody tried to the extent that they could.
I'm talking about ministers now. I'm talking about the public service, immigration officers who have not carried out their duties. You have policies in place, and the extent to which you have those in place, you ought to be commended. But if you have policies in place and the policy is not being carried out, it is not. We are talking about the public service falling down on the job here, eh?
Well, look, my predecessor, my immediate predecessor, has a disagreement with us philosophically on what we're doing.
Yes.
He says that their view is that it's in the larger interest not to enforce laws like this with regard to children. And he thinks that in any case the bureaucracy can't handle it. Well, I suppose that's one point of view. And he went on to espouse what their position was. So they actually stayed the hand of immigration with regard to this, and that was their policy. Fair enough if that was their policy. But the point is that the crescendo of the reaction to the fact that people appear, it looks to them as if people are being, the country's being drowned or awash in people who do not have a right to be here, and that resources are being swamped, has caused us to act, and we have to act. That's my view.
You are acting, though your Fred Smith, Attorney Fred Smith says that you're acting with a heavy hand, and because you are placing a unnecessary burden on people who would eventually who will be entitled to citizenship at the age of 18. The point is, he cites Article 7 of the Constitution, and Article 7 of the Constitution gives the children that entitlement upon becoming 18 to apply and to be registered.
Yes, subject to certain provisions. One of them is that, as may be prescribed, the Constitution says, by Parliament. And Parliament has prescribed certain exceptions to this, where you can refuse registration, amongst them, convictions for certain criminal offenses and other reasons of public policy. So they're all listed in the Bahamas Nationality Act. So it's not an unqualified right to get registered.
But a child or a person behaving themselves or him or herself in the Bahamas for 18 years and applying would be entitled.
Yes, who's lived here all their lives.
Yes.
That's a less difficult issue than someone who went, and I just looked at about half a dozen applications this morning. People who said, I went away when I was 2, I'm back here now at 17, and I want to get registered as a citizen of the Bahamas. And the file says they can't speak English, they can't recite the pledge, they don't know the national anthem, they did poorly on the tests. Well, in those circumstances, do you register someone to be a citizen of the Bahamas? I don't think the Constitution really contemplated that to happen.
But what is your right to deny them? They were born in the Bahamas through no fault of their own. They were taken to Haiti or Jamaica. They came back at 16, 17.
If they don't meet all of those criteria that I outlined, then they can be denied the citizenship, and that's a denied registration.
Yeah, but a person not being able to speak English, is that a good reason to deny them citizenship?
I'm not sure whether you can say it's good or bad, but it's one of the criteria you look at, because you need to speak English to function in this society.
But that is not in the law, is it?
Well, policy considerations.
Yeah, but the criticism too is that you have confused the policy and the law. Your policy suggests something, but the law demands another. And your detractors say that you confuse policy with the law,
not at all.
and the law ought to take precedence.
Not at all. The law says, subject to such reasons as public policy. It says that in the Nationality Act, so the minister can act according to that.
I see. the number of people in the Bahamas, any idea the number of children in the Bahamas who would have to be registered?
I saw, again, a statement from the Director of Education who says about 6,000 children he thinks would be affected by this.
6,000?
That's what he said, yeah.
What about children who have who are out of school, out of our public school system, or schools generally? Any idea on the number of young people who have applied and are awaiting registration?
I don't have an absolute number, but I would say it's in the thousands, and we're proceeding to chip away at that on a weekly basis.
On a weekly basis in the Department of Immigration?
Yes. What happens is the Department of Immigration is the funnel, so to speak, for this, the application process, the interview process, and all the rest of it. But the Cabinet ultimately makes a decision on permanent residence with the right to work or citizenship.
Mm-hmm. And you're making progress on that, you said?
Not as much as I would want, because Cabinet time is very difficult to obtain. But we've, again, in terms of the reforms and measures that we put in place, certain suggestions have been advanced, which have been accepted by the government as a mechanism for dealing with it, and I think we'll chip away at it.
Going back to what the former minister said, is this the whole issue of citizenship and the registration of children? Do you think that all of this is too politicized in the country? It's a political issue.
My impression is it's not politicized in the sense that there's any partisan division on this, because the three political parties have issued statements in support of what we're doing. There are various nuances on the edges, but the general policy is accepted by the three political parties, which is something we were able to not even able to accomplish with getting rights for women. So it's extraordinary that immigration has been the one subject that everybody's agreed on. We have to do something about it, and we have to put some discipline in the system. So I'm not so concerned about that, so to speak. What I think is happening is you have some extremists who are advocates for the migrant community, who would wish us to do nothing and just let the place go. That's the way it appears. They've made certain extreme statements which are unhelpful to their cause, and as I said, are practiced in the art of victimhood, of creating victims where none are. And that's where the noise is coming from. I was speaking to our colleagues in the Press Association on Sunday last, and I said I read in the editorial of the Freeport News calling for balance in the immigration policy, and I can assure you that there is balance, because they're competing public interests. Just the question of how, for example, we deal with children in the schools, they're competing public interests there, and the question is you must find balance. So there is balance, but I asked them, do they put the same strictures and make the same demands on these people who are practiced in the art of victimhood? Three expressions which I take issue with from the Grand Bahama Human Rights Association, and they are these. First, they accuse the Department of Immigration of institutional terrorism. Terrorism, is a buzzword. It's a pejorative. It means certain things, and there is no evidence of terrorism in this country, by institutional or otherwise, by the Department of Immigration. Secondly, when that didn't work, they then said that not only was it institutional terrorism, but that they said that we were operating Auschwitz in the Bahamas. Now, Auschwitz is a gas chamber. That is, Nazi gas chambers. That means people were being gassed by the Nazi government. So is there evidence that people are being gassed in any facility by the Bahamas government and being covered up in such a way? And then they also use the expression ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing, of course, is a crime against humanity. That means that it is the official policy to target a particular group or ethnicity and eliminate them from the country. Where is the evidence of that? None. And no objective organization has called these people out on the slanderous and defamatory remarks against officers of the Immigration Department. Just let them go and say whatever they wish.
But they also say that the immigration policy itself is illegal.
The policy is not illegal. It is totally within the confines of the law. There is only one thing that requires an amendment to the act, and that is almost through the cabinet. We think on Tuesday we should have it done and available to then be presented to the House.
What does
and
that
that
mean, sir?
is the recreation of what we're calling a belongers permit, which is designed to give status to the very people that these people say they want to help. That is this group from 0 to 18 who, though the Constitution gives them this right to apply when they reach their 18th birthday, but gives them no immigration status in between. And this is designed to give them that status. But this crew is out there fighting the reforms on the basis that people are being made victims, and that is ludicrous.
But are you reacting to a phobia that we have in the Bahamas? And there are a good number of Bahamians who are xenophobic, and they have a difficulty with people from northern Haiti in particular. Are you reacting to the phobia by enforcing the policy?
Let me put it this way. I said to people, you know, they talk about my history and so on and so forth. Right now, I'm not the Minister of Social Commentary. I'm the Minister for Immigration, and the responsibility is carrying out the law. Our party, its Charter for Governance, said that it was going to engage in immigration reform. We also know that there are objective reasons why it is necessary for there to be immigration reform. You can have a situation where you've got 3 states that border us: Turks and Caicos on the south, Cuba to the west, the United States to the north. And we have to know who is in our territory. We can't have this place be a staging ground for every Tom, Dick, and Harry to go and, you know, wreak havoc on the states next door. That's a national security issue. It's a national security for our own country, and it's internal security. So that's one. Number 2 is people are genuinely concerned about their cultural identity, and they want a country which they recognize, and they want that country to hand off to their children. That's the fact. You know, the days are, in the old days, suppose when we were living on the Serengeti Plains, we used to, if you get, you know, hungry and there's not enough food here, you just pick up your family and go to the next place. Well, these days you have nation states, and you can't just hop on a boat and go someplace else unless you have permission, and it's documented. And that's the only issue for immigration, that is when you come in through the front door, and you come in a documented fashion. If you conform with those and the rules, not a problem. I don't think Bahamians have a problem. That's the issue.
Let's take a break here, Minister. We're on Jones and Company. We'll come right back.